Between them, Cameron Smith and Jon Rahm have 3 major championships, 2 LIV Golf individual season titles, 2 team titles, and somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million in Saudi money. In February of 2026, both of them were given the one and only chance the PGA Tour was offering them to come home. Both said no. Then in April, the Saudis announced they were pulling the plug. And what Smith and Rahm have done in the 8 weeks since is the part nobody saw coming. This is not a story about LIV Golf dying. It is a story about 2 men doing math. To understand what is happening right now, you have to go back to August of 2022 when Cameron Smith made a decision that genuinely shocked the golf world. 3 months after winning the 150th Open Championship at St. Andrews, Smith signed with LIV Golf for a reported $100 million. He was 28 years old. He was the reigning Players' Championship winner. He was ranked number 2 in the world. And he was, by most honest assessments, the most marketable young talent the sport had produced in a decade. Every defection before him could be explained away. Dustin Johnson was 38. Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau had been dealing with injury. Patrick Reed's form was already declining. Smith was different. Smith left with everything still in front of him. He cited the schedule. He cited the family pull. He admitted the money played a role. And then he went to LIV and built something that, by every metric the league cared about, was a success. He captained Ripper GC, the Australian team that became LIV's most beloved franchise. He won 3 individual LIV tournaments. He earned an estimated $50 million across 4 seasons on top of his signing bonus. LIV Golf Adelaide, the Australian flagship event Smith helped anchor, drew over 1.1 million spectators across 4 days in 2026, a new attendance record for professional golf in Australia. As a team captain in a commercial property, Cameron Smith was exactly what LIV Golf had been. The rest of his career fell apart. Smith missed the cut at the 2024 Open at Royal Troon. He missed every major cut in 2025. He missed the cut at the 2026 Masters with rounds of 74 and 77. That is 6 consecutive missed cuts in golf's biggest events. For a player who had won the Open Championship at the home of golf just 4 years earlier, the narrative shifted from whether he had made the right call to whether he could still play. That is a brutal place for a former world number 2 to find himself. It defined the first chapter of whatever story comes next. Jon Rahm arrived 2 years later, and his story carries a different weight entirely. In December of 2023, the Spaniard signed a deal reported at over $300 million, walking away from the PGA Tour at the absolute career. He was the reigning Masters champion. He had won 11 PGA Tour events. He had been the world number 1 as recently as that summer. His defection was, until that moment, the single most expensive transaction in the history of professional sports. Unlike Smith, Rahm did not lose his golf game on LIV. He won the LIV individual season title in 2024. He won it again in 2025. His Legion 13 team won the team title in 2025 as well. At the 2026 PGA Championship, Rahm contended in his Sunday and finished tied for. He is, by any honest measurement, the best golfer currently on LIV Golf and arguably one of the 3 best players in the world regardless of. But Rahm's situation carries a cost that does not show up on a leader. He has an ongoing dispute with the DP World Tour over membership reinstatement, and that impasse carries real consequences. His 2027 Ryder Cup eligibility runs through the European circuit. If he does not resolve the DP World Tour issue, he is not eligible to defend or compete for Europe at Bethpage. The DP World Tour has, according to multiple reports, been actively looking for a path back for him. Rahm has not made it easy. At the Masters, he was unapologetic. He gave no indication of softening his position. At the PGA Championship, he was direct. My job is to play golf. Luckily, I'm decent at it, and that's what I can focus on. That is not the language of a man in crisis. But it is also not the language of a man who has secured his future. In January of 2026, the PGA Tour created what it called the Returning Member Program. The terms were narrow and specific. The pathway was open only to players who had won a major championship or the Players' Championship between 2022 and 2025. For players qualified, Koepka, who had already left LIV, Smith, Rahm, and DeChambeau. The window opened in late January and closed on February 2nd, 2 days before LIV Golf's first tournament of the 2026 season. The cost of admission was steep: a $5 million donation to charity, a 5-year forfeiture of PGA Tour player equity shares, a sum estimated by analysts of between $50 million and $85 million. No FedEx Cup bonus money for 2026. No signature event eligibility for the season. Brooks Koepka took the deal and returned at the Farmers Insurance Open. Smith, Rahm, and DeChambeau did not. At LIV's Media Week in South Florida, both players were asked directly. Rahm said, "Yeah, I'm not planning on going anywhere. I wish Brooks the best, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm focused on LIV for this year and hoping my team can repeat as champs." Smith was sharper. He said, "I have made my bed, and I am going to sleep in it. I feel like I am in a really good place in my career and my life, my family life, and I do not need to change it." There was no anger in either answer. There was a finality. Both men had taken the money, taken the contracts, taken the lifestyle, and decided that the price of getting back into the PGA Tour was higher than they were willing to pay. At the time, that looked like a settled question. It was not. 3 months later, the math changed entirely. In April of 2026, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund informed LIV Golf staff that it would no longer fund the league after the end of the 2026 season. The PF had poured over $5 billion into LIV across 4 years. Losses had reached nearly $500 million in 2024 alone. LIV's chief executive had told the Financial Times that breaking even was still 5 to 10 years away. The Saudis had heard enough. The official announcement: PF has made the decision to fund LIV Golf only for the remainder of the 2026 season. The substantial investment required by LIV Golf over a longer term is no longer consistent with the current phase of PIF's investment strategy. One of LIV's scheduled 2026 events was postponed almost immediately. Inside the locker room, the calculus that had governed every player's decision for the previous 4 years collapsed in a week. A Golf Digest source confirmed that the returning member program was not expected to be renewed. The one-time offer that Smith and Rahm had turned down in February was gone. The door behind them had closed. And then the silence from both camps became something worth paying attention. Here is where the story stops being predictable. According to Golfweek reporter Adam Schupak, a PGA Tour caddy indicated that representatives for both Rahm and Smith have been quietly re-engaging with PGA Tour officials. Not publicly, not on the record, but through management. The conversations, according to the reporting, are about whether the door the tour closed in February could be reopened under different. The timing matters enormously. Both players publicly insisted in February that they were staying. The Saudis pulled the plug in April, and now their camps are reportedly back at the table. Smith, for his part, is still holding the line in public. At the PGA Championship at Erin Hills, he insisted LIV would survive past 2026. When asked who exactly had given him that assurance, he smiled and said, "I promise you will hear it first from someone else rather than me." That is a careful answer. It is the kind of answer a man gives when he does not want to be wrong twice. But actions carry more information than press conference quotes. Smith fired his swing coach Grant Fee, the only swing coach he had ever had since the age of 9. That is not a minor adjustment. That is a structural decision about the kind of player he wants to be going for. Then he shot a closing 68 on Sunday at the PGA Championship and tied for 7th. His first made cut in a major in nearly 2 years. He told reporters, "It feels great to play nice. You do not work hard to play crap. A man rebuilding something says that. A man coasting does not." Rahm's behavior at the same event told a parallel story. He contended in his Sunday, finished tied for 4th, and when reporters pushed him on LIV's future, he gave them nothing to work with. "My job is to play golf. Luckily, I'm decent at it." That is a man who has decided where his energy goes and where it doesn't. For years of publicly defending the Saudi project, and now, at the moment when the project is most visibly in trouble, Rahm is talking about his iron play. There is a dimension to this story that the headlines keep missing, and it is the dimension that will determine what any return actually. The PGA Tour's position on Rahm is significantly harder than its position on Smith, and the reason comes down to timing. The view from inside Ponte Vedra, according to multiple sources, is that Rahm's defection at the end of 2023 may have prolonged the entire LIV conflict by a full year. By the time Rahm crossed over, the framework agreement between the PGA Tour and PIF was advancing. LIV was on the financial road. Rahm's signature gave the Saudi project the validation it needed to keep going. Players inside the PGA Tour locker room have not forgotten that. Cameron Smith, by contrast, left in 2022 when LIV's future was still wide open. He took the money before there was a framework agreement to disrupt. That distinction is not a detail. It is the entire ballgame when it comes to what kind of terms each man can realistically expect. Whatever return mechanism the tour eventually offers, it will not treat the two players the same. Rahm carries a political cost inside that building that Smith does not. So what did Smith and Rahm just do that nobody expected? They went quiet. After 4 years of public commitment to LIV, after publicly turning down the only structured pathway home, after publicly insisting in April that the league would survive, both men have stopped fighting the conversation. Their teams are reportedly talking to the tour. Smith fired the coach who built his swing and started making cuts in majors. Rahm contended at the PGA Championship and refused to take the bait when asked about LIV's. Neither one of them is begging to come back. Neither one of them is committing to LIV. They're doing the one thing nobody expected from two players who spent 4 years being the loudest defenders of the Saudi project. They are waiting, and they are playing. This is not the behavior of men committed to LIV for life.